Oh my god, I have a lot of watch later movies.
It is okay to be so stressed and
Okay. Hey guys. Hey Cool Gamer. Hey Deb. Hold on. I swear, every time I go live, that's when he gets loud. Thank you, Deb. Made myself choke screaming. It's like 21! So it has its headphones on. Hey, Mama 3. I don't know what it is. Every time I go live, stuff like happens. Oh my god. My one cat's trying to rip up what I'm going to use for wallpaper in the house I built. My other cat is staring at me, and the other one's pissed off because I yelled. No, I haven't. I've been so busy. I've been out every single day. With like me and Leland, we've been going out every single day. Just going for walks and going to visit park. We went to the skate park, so we've been gone. And then whenever I'm not gone, I'm trying to earn money on these stupid flipping games you do, but they take forever. And that script. And then making videos. I don't know. I just finally, excuse me, I feel like I have like no time. Hey, Teresa. Okay, we're still on the Elizabeth Striding quest too. Hello. Hey. Oh my God, this sick of this ice thing, like mute. There. Hopefully that stops it. I know. Sorry, I've just been really busy. All right, we're at the corner. Was she a Swede? Yes. What was her name? Elizabeth Gustafs's daughter was her maiden name. Elizabeth Stride was her married name, and she was the wife of John Thomas Stride, a ship's carpenter. She was born on the 27th of November 1843 at Torslander near Gothenburg in Sweden. Coroner, was she married in your church? The witness says no. We register those who come into this country bringing with them a certificate and desiring to be registered. Coroner, when was she registered? Witness, our register is dated July 10th, 1866. She was registered as, if I have to say that word one more time, it's going to go. It is. That's why I'm trying to get the heck out of the house. I'm like, yeah, I don't even, like, I haven't even touched that script. I've looked at it. I haven't even read it. I've just been gone. So she was registered as an unmarried woman. The coroner says, how do you know she was the wife of John Thomas Stride? Witness says, I suppose she gave it to the clergyman, as it is written here. In the registry, I find a memorandum dated in the handwriting of the Reverend Mr. Palmer, in abbreviated Swedish. It means married to an Englishman, John Thomas Stride. I do not know when this entry was made. Coroner says, how long has Mr. Palmer been at the church? The witness says about a year. This registry is a new one and copied from an older book. I have seen the original entry and it was written many years ago. Like the sun was out all day. It's still out right now. It's 7:08. It's like, oh, finally spring. So yesterday was very nice. Today it was pretty cold. It was pretty cold. But I seen that they had bacon on sale and we never buy bacon because I'm not paying $10 a pack. I'm just not. And it was on for 3.77, so we went over and bought one. Connor says, "Would you mind looking at the entry in the older book and see whose handwriting it is?" The witness says, "I will." Inspector Reed says, "Do you know this hymn book?" Witness says, "Yes." Coroner, "Is there any name in it?" Witness says, "No, I gave it to the deceased last winter." Coroner, "Do you know when she was married to Stride?" What? Huh? Do you know when she was married to Stride? Oh, duh. Witness says, "I think it was 1869, and she told me her husband was drowned in the Princess Alice." Coroner says, "Have you any schools connected with the Swedish church?" Witness says, "No, I do not remember hearing she ever had any children. She told me her husband went down in the Princess Alice." There's a couple stories here that her kid, she does have surviving kids. One that went to stay with an aunt got shipped off to school. The other one, I think she does see sometimes, and then the other two died. Coroner says, "Have you ever seen her husband?" The witness states, "No, I think we gave Elizabeth Stride some assistance before we knew her husband was dead. I forget what she was living at the time, but 2 years ago she gave her address as Devonshire Street, Commercial Road. She said she was doing a little work, sewing. Deceased could speak English pretty well." Coroner, "Do you know when Elizabeth came to England?" Witness, "I cannot say, but I think a little before the name was registered." William Marshall said, "I live at 64 Burner Street, Commercial Road, and am a laborer. On Sunday last, I saw the body of Elizabeth Stride in the mortuary. I recognized it as that of a woman I saw on Saturday evening about 3 doors off from where I am living in Burner Street. That was about 11:45. She was on the pavement opposite number 68, and between Christian Street and Boyd Street, she was standing talking to a man. I recognized her both by her face and dress." Coroner says, "Was she wearing a flower when you saw her?" No. Coroner, "Were they talking quietly?" Yes. Coroner, "Can you describe the man?" There was no lamp near, and I did not see the face of the man she was talking to. He had on a small black coat and dark trousers. He seemed to me to be a middle-aged man. Coroner, "What sort of cap was he wearing?" He was wearing a round cap with a small peak to it, something like what a sailor would wear. Coroner, "What height was he?" About 5 feet 6 inches, and he was rather stout. He was decently dressed, and I should say he worked at some light business and had more the appearance of a clerk than anything else. Coroner, did you see whether he had any whiskers? From what I saw of his face, I did not think he had. He was not wearing gloves, and he had no stick or anything in his hand. Coroner, "What sort of coat was it?" A cut-away one. Coroner, "You are quite sure this is the woman?" "Yes, I am. I do not take much notice of them. I was standing at my door, and what attracted my attention first was her standing there some time, and he was kissing her. I heard the man say to Elizabeth, 'You would say anything but your prayers.' He was mildly speaking and appeared to be an educated man. They went down the street." Coroner, "Would they pass the club?" "Yeah, they had done so." Coroner, "How was she dressed?" "In a black jacket and black skirt." Coroner, "Were either of them the worse for drink?" "They did not appear to be so. I went in about 12 o'clock and heard nothing more until I heard murder being called in the street. I had then just gone 1 o'clock." A juryman says, "How long were you standing at the door?" "From 11:30 to 12." Another juryman, "Did it rain then?" "No, it did not rain until nearly 3 o'clock." Foreman, "What sort of bonnet had she on?" "I believe it was a small black crepe one." Inspector Reed, "When you saw them first, they were standing between your house and the club." "Yes, they were, and they remained there for about 10 minutes. They passed me once. I could not see the man's face, and it was turned towards Elizabeth Stride. There was a lamp over number 70. Inspector Reed, "Were they hurrying along?" "No." "Was it raining at the time?" "No, it was not." Mr. Olson, recalled, said, "I find that the original entry of the marriage of the deceased is in the handwriting of Mr. Frost, who was the pastor for about 18 years until 2 years ago." James Brown stated, "I live at 35 Fairclough Street. I saw the deceased about 1:15 on Sunday morning. At that time, I was going from I was going from my own house to get some support from a chandler's shop at the corner of Burner Street and Fairclough Street. As I was going across the road, I saw a man and woman standing by the board school in Fairclough Street. They were standing against the wall.
I'm sorry if I was yelling. It's just my friend. My friends keep on asking me this and that, this and that. How do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do that? Well, oh, how do you do this? No, how do you do this? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, Jesus Christ!
Shush.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
I get it. You have to shut up first. Because you're knowledgeable. You know everything. So all your friends want to know the answers. Nice. Oh, so here's your. It's like, as I passed them, I heard the woman say, "No, not tonight. Some other night." That made me turn around and I looked at them. I am certain the woman was Elizabeth Stride. I did not notice any flowers in her dress. The man had his arm up against the wall, and the woman had her back to the wall facing him. I noticed that the man had a long coat on, which came very nearly down to his knees, sorry, his heels. I believe it was an overcoat. I cannot say what kind of cap he had on. The place where they were standing was rather dark. I saw nothing light in color about either of them. I then went on and went indoors. I had finished my supper when I heard screams of police and murder. That was about a quarter of an hour after I got in. I do not think it was raining at the time. I should say the man was about 5 feet 7 inches in height. He appeared to be stoutish built. Both the man and the woman appeared to be sober. I did not notice any foreign accent about the woman's voice. When I heard screams of police and murder, I opened the window, but could not see anyone, and the screams ceased. The cries were those of moving persons and appeared to be going in the direction of Grove Street. Shortly afterwards, I saw a policeman standing at the corner of Christian Street. I heard a man opposite call out to the constable that he was wanted. I then saw the policeman run along to Burner Street by the corner. I am almost certain it was Elizabeth Stride. Police Constable William Smith, 452H, said that on Saturday night, his beat was to pass Burner Street. He went from the corner of Jowers Walk, Commercial Road, as far as Christian Street, down Christian Street and Fairclough Street, as far as Grove Street, then back along Fairclough Street as far back as Backchurch Lane, up there as far as Commercial Road, taking all the interior streets, including Burner Street and Bailey Street in the witness. Street, 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 street. The witness continued, "It takes me from 25 minutes to half an hour to go around my beat. I was last in Burner Street about 12:30 or 12:35 at 1 o'clock. I went to the Burner Street in my ordinary round. I saw a crowd of people outside the gates of number 40. I did not hear any cries of police when I got there. I saw constables 12HR and 252H. I then saw Elizabeth, and on looking at her, found she was dead. I then went to the station of the ambulance. Dr. Blackwell's assistant came just as I was going away." Coroner, did you go up to Burner Street and into Commercial Road? No, I turned up Fairclough Street. Do you see anyone? Did you see anyone? No, sir. Were you in Burner Street the previous time? Did you see anyone? Yes, a man and a woman. Was the latter anything like the deceased? Yes, I saw her face. I have seen the deceased in the mortuary, and I feel certain it is the same person. Was she on the pavement? Yes, a few yards up Burner Street on the opposite side to where she was found. Did you see the man who was talking to her? Yes, I noticed he had a newspaper parcel in his hand. It was about 18 inches in length and 6 inches or 8 inches in width. He was about 5 feet 7 inches, as near as I could say. He had a hard felt deerstalker hat of dark color and dark clothes. What kind of a coat was it? An overcoat. He wore dark trousers. Did you overhear my conversation? No. Did he seem sober? Yes. I did not see much of the face of the man except that he had no whiskers. Can you form any idea to his age? About 28 years. Can you give any idea as to what he was? No, sir, I cannot. He was of respectable appearance. I noticed the woman had a flower in her jacket. When you saw them talking, which way did you go? Straight up Burner Street into the Commercial Road, in the center of Burner Street, and some courts which led into Backchurch Lane. Hey, Zuna. When did it last rain before 1 o'clock? To the best of my knowledge or recollection, it rained very little after 11 o'clock. The foreman, was the man or the woman acting in a suspicious manner? No. Do you see many prostitutes or people hanging out in Burner Street? No, very few. Inspector Reed says, did you see these people more than once? No. When I saw the deceased lying on the ground, I recognized her at once and made a report of what I had seen. The witness kidney was recalled, and the coroner said, have you ever seen that hymn book before? Yes. I recognize it as one of belonging to Elizabeth Stride. It used to be in my place. I found it in Mrs. Smith's room next to my own. Mrs. Smith said Elizabeth gave it to her to take care of when she left on Tuesday. Inspector Reed. When you and the deceased lived together, I believe you had a padlock on the door. Yeah, there was only one key, which I had, but she got in and out somehow. The book was taken from the room on Wednesday week, the day after she went away. That was done during my absence. Coroner, what makes you think there was anything the matter with the roof of her mouth? She told me she was kicked. She was kicked when the Princess Alice went down. So that's weird. And then other people say there's nothing wrong with the top of her, like the roof of her mouth. And then they're saying that there is something. I don't know. There's a couple conflicting things here, and it's kind of annoying. But I think maybe they just didn't see the teeth or whatever, or they thought maybe she had teeth because they didn't see that she was missing teeth. Because I mean, if she's not smiling or anything, oh my God, I have to do this again. Philip Krantz, who claimed to affirm, said, I live at 40 Burner Street and am the editor of a Hebrew paper called The Workless Friend. I work in the room at the back of the printing office on the ground floor, and the entrance is from the yard. I was in the back from room 9 o'clock on Saturday until one of the members of the club came and told me where there was a woman lying in the yard. Coroner, have you heard any cry or scream? None. Was your window or door open? No. Is it a wooden structure? No, it's brick. Supposing a woman had screamed, would you have heard it? I don't know. They were singing upstairs. When you went out into the yard, was there anyone around deceased? Yes. Members of the club were near the woman, but there was no one there that I did not know. Were you on the lookout to see if there was any stranger there? No, I went out into the street to look for a policeman. Do you think it's possible for anyone to escape without being noticed after you arrived there? I do not think it was, but he might have done so before. Did you see the face of Elizabeth Stride? No. My name and address was taken, and I was examined and searched by the police. Constable 12 HR said, at 5:30 on Sunday morning, I washed all traces of blood away. That was after the doctors had left. There was no traces of blood on the wall. Detective Inspector Edmund Reed, H Division, stated, I received a telegram at 1:25 a.m. on Sunday morning at the Commercial Street Police Office. I at once proceeded to 40 Burner Street. I saw there Chief Inspector West, Inspector Pinhorn, several sergeants and constables, Doctors Phillips and Blackwell, a number of residents in the yard, and club members with persons who had come into the yard and had been shut in by the police. At that time, Dr. Phillips, with Dr. Blackwell, was examining the throat of the deceased woman. Superintendent Arnold followed in, as well as several other officers. When it was found a murder had been committed, a thorough search was made of the yard, houses, and buildings, but no trace could be found of any person likely to have committed the deed. As soon as the search was over, the whole of the persons who had come into the yard and the members of the club were interrogated, their names and addresses taken, their pockets searched, and their clothes and hands examined. There was 28 There's 28 of them. Each person was dealt with separately. They properly accounted for themselves, and then they were allowed to leave. The houses were then visited a second time, and the names of the people therein taken, and they were also examined and their rooms searched. The door of the loft was found locked on the inside, and it was forced. The loft was searched, but no trace of the murderer could be found. A description was taken of the body and circulated round the surrounding stations by wire. Inquiries were made in the street at the different houses, and no person could be found who heard any disturbance during that night. I immediately examined the wall near the body was found, but could find no spots of blood. About 4:30, the body was removed to the mortuary. I then informed you, the coroner, verbally at your residence, and then returned to the yard and made another examination. It being daylight, I searched the walls thoroughly, but could find no marks of any person having scaled them. Sorry. I then proceeded to the mortuary and took a correct description of the body and the clothing, which is as follows. I guessed her age was 42, length 5 feet 2 inches, complexion is pale, hair dark brown and curly. I raised an eyelid and found her eyes were light gray. I parted her lips and found that she had lost her upper teeth in the front. Okay, so she did lose her teeth. That's what I'm thinking. She lost them, but people just must have assumed that she had teeth because if she didn't have her mouth open or was smiling, they just assumed that she did. I'm just assuming. She had an old black skirt and an old black jacket trimmed with fur. Fastened on the right side was a small bunch of flowers consisting of maidenhair fern. Jesus. and red rose. She had two light serge petticoats with white stockings, white chemise and insertion in front, side spring boots, and black cape bonnet. In her jacket pocket, I found two pocket handkerchiefs, a thimble, and a piece of wood on a card. Tony, you can't just touch people's stuff. There, lay down. You can't go on that. Come on. Don't do it. Alrighty. I'm trying to read, but this cat is in the way. The description then was circulated. Since then, the police engaged in the inquiry had made house-to-house inquiry in the immediate neighborhood, with the result that we have been able to produce the witnesses which have appeared before you. The inquiry is still going on. Every endeavor is being made to arrest the assassin, but up to the present without success. At this stage, the inquiry was adjourned on Tuesday week. Okay, just don't go on the laptop. Seriously, you just have to have your foot on it, don't you? Shithead. You're gonna fall. Claire. Just get up here. Claire. Yeah, she's also a bad girl. Oh, you mad at me? I'm sorry, but you can't lay on the laptop. We are requested to state that the Sir Charles Warren has been making inquiries as to practically of employing trained bloodhounds for the use in special cases in the streets of London, and having ascertained that dogs can be procured and have been accustomed to work in a town, he is making immediate arrangements for their use in London. The police authorities of Whitehall have had reproduced in facsimile and published on the walls of London the letter and postcards sent to the Central News Agency. The language of the card and the letter is of a brutal character and is full of Americanisms. The handwriting, which is clear and plain and disguised in part, is that of a person accustomed to write a round hand like that employed by clerks in offices. The exact color of the ink and the smears of blood are reproduced in the place card, and information is asked in identification of the handwriting. The postcard bears a tolerably clear imprint of a bloody thumb or a finger mark. Ooh, is this one of the Jack the Ripper letters finally? Thanks, Claire. The Times of Thursday, October 1888, page 7, printed the thanks of Sir Charles Warren to people of the East End for the way they had assisted the inquiries of the Metropolitan Police. The East End murders. We are requested to publish the following. Sir Charles Warren wishes to say that the marked desire evinced by the inhabitants of the Whitechapel district to aid police in the pursuit of author of the recent crimes has enabled him to direct that, subject to the consent of the occupiers, as thorough house-to-house search should be made within a defined area. With few exceptions, the inhabitants of all classes and creeds have freely fallen in with the proposal and have merely assisted the officers engaged in carrying it out. Sir Charles Warren feels that some acknowledgment is due on all sides for the cordial cooperation of inhabitants, and he is much gratified that the police officers have carried out so delicate a duty with the marked good will of all those with whom they have come in contact. Sir Charles Warren takes this opportunity of acknowledging the receipts of an immense volume of correspondence of semi-private character on the subject of the Whitechapel murders, which he has been quite unable to respond to in a great number of instances, and he trusts that the writers will accept his acknowledgment in lieu of individual replies. They may be assured that their letters have received every consideration. The Times of Wednesday, 24th October 1888, page 3, gave a report on the final day of the inquest into the death of Elizabeth Stride. The East End murders. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. Win E. Baxter, coroner for the Southeastern Division at Middlesex, resumed his adjourned inquiry at the Vestry Hall, Cable Street, St. George's in the East End, respecting the death of Elizabeth Stride, who was found murdered in Berners Street, St. George on the 30th. Detective Inspector Reed, H Division, watched on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. Detective Inspector Edmund Reed said, I have examined the books of the Poplar and Stepney Sick Asylum, and find therein the entry of the death of John Thomas William Stride, a carpenter of Poplar. His death took place on the 24th day of October 1884. Witness then said that he had found Mrs. Watts, who would give evidence. Constable Walter Stride stated that he recognized the deceased by the photographs as the person who married his uncle, John Stride, Thomas Stride, in 1872 or 1873. His uncle was a carpenter, and the last time witness saw him, he was living in the East India Dock Road, Poplar. Elizabeth Stokes, 5 Charles Street, Tottenham, said, my husband's name is Joseph Stokes, and he is a brickmaker. My first husband's name was Watts, a wine merchant of Bath. Mrs. Mary Malcolm of 15 Eagle Street, Red Lion Square, Holborn, is my sister. I have received an anonymous letter from the Shepton Mallet saying my first husband is alive. I want to clear my character. My sister I have not seen for years. She has given me a dreadful character. Her evidence is all false. I have 5 brothers and sisters. A juryman says perhaps she refers to another sister. Inspector Reed. She identified the deceased person as her sister and said that she had a crippled foot. This witness has a crippled foot. Witness, this has put me to a dreadful trouble and trial. I have only a poor crippled husband who is now outside. It is a shame my sister should say that, what she has said about me, and that the innocent should suffer for guilty. Coroner, is Mrs. Malcolm here? Inspector Reed. No, sir. The coroner. In summing up, said the jury would probably agree with him that it would be unreasonable to adjourn this inquiry again on the chance of something further being ascertained to elucidate the mysterious case on which they have devoted so much time. The first difficulty which presented itself in the identification of the deceased. That was not an unimportant matter. The trouble was principally occasioned by Mrs. Malcolm, who after some hesitation, and after having had 2 further opportunities of viewing again the body, positively swore that the deceased was her sister, Mrs. Elizabeth Watts of Bath. It had since been clearly proved that she was mistaken, notwithstanding the visions which were simultaneously at the hour of the death to her and her husband. If her evidence was correct, there were points of resemblance between the deceased and Elizabeth Watts, which almost reminded one of the Comedy of Errors. Both have been courted by policemen. They both bore the same Christian name and were of the same age. Both lived with sailors. Both at one time kept coffee houses at Poplar. Both were nicknamed Long Liz. Both were said to have had children in charge of their husbands. Friends, both were given to the drink. Both lived in East and common lodging houses. Both had been charged at the Thames Police Court. Both had escaped punishment on the ground that they were subject to epileptic fits. Although the friends of both were certain that this was fraud, both had lost their front teeth and both had been leading very questionable lives. Whatever might be the true explanation of this marvelous similarity, it appeared to be pretty satisfactorily proved that the deceased was Elizabeth Stride, and that about the year 1869, she was married to a carpenter named John Thomas Stride. Unlike the other victims in the series of crimes in this neighborhood, a distinct teaming with representatives of all nations, she was not an Englishwoman. She was born in Sweden in the year 1843, but having resided in this country for upwards of 22 years, she could speak English fluently and without much foreign accent. At one time, the deceased and her husband kept a coffee house in Poplar. At another time, she was staying at Devonshire Street, Commercial Road, supporting herself, it was said, by sewing and charring. On and off for the last 6 years, she lived in common lodging houses in the notorious lane called Flower and Dean Street. She was there only known by the nickname of Long Liz, and often told a tale which might have been a lie of her husband and children having gone down with the Princess Alice ship. The deputy of the lodging house stated that what? The deputy of the lodging house stated that while with her, that's it, she was a quiet and sober woman, although she used at times to stay out late at night, an offense very venial, he suspected, among those who frequented the establishment. For the last 2 years, Elizabeth Stride had been living at Comet Lodging House in Dorset Street, Spitalfields, with Michael Kidney, a waterside laborer belonging to the Army Reserve. But at intervals during this period, amounting altogether to about 5 months. She left him without any apparent reason except a desire to be free from the restraint even of that connection and to obtain greater opportunity of indulging her drinking habits. She was last seen alive by Kidney in Commercial Street on the evening of Tuesday, September 25th. She was sober, but never returned home that night. She alleged that she had some words with her paramour, but this was denied. This he denied. The next day, he called during his absence and took away some things, but with this exception, they did not know what became of her until the following Thursday, when she made her appearance at her old quarters in Flowers and Dean Street. Here she remained until Saturday, September 29th. On that day, she cleaned the deputy's rooms and received a small remuneration for her trouble. Between 6 and 7 o'clock on that evening, she was in the kitchen wearing the jacket, bonnet, and striped silk handkerchief, which were afterwards found on her. She had at least 60 in her possession, which was possibly spent during the evening. Before leaving, she gave a piece of velvet to a friend to take care of until her return. But she said neither where she was going nor when she would return. She had not paid for her lodgings. Hey, Kimmy. Although she was in a position to do so, there were nothing of her movements during the next 4 or 5 hours at least, possibly not till the finding of her lifeless body. But 3 witnesses spoke to having seen a woman that they identified as a deceased with more or less certainty, and at times within an hour and a quarter of the period when, and at places within 100 yards of the spot where she was ultimately found. William Marshall, who lived at 64 Berners Street, was standing in his doorway from 11:30 till midnight. About a quarter to 12 o'clock, he saw the deceased talking to a man between Fairclough Street and Boyd Street. There was every demonstration of affection by the man during the 10 minutes they stood together, and when last seen, strolling down the road towards Elm Street, his arms were around her neck. At 12:30, the constable on the beat, William Smith, saw the deceased in Berners Street standing on the pavement a few yards from Commercial Street, and he observed she was wearing a flower in her dress. A quarter of an hour afterwards, James Brown, of Fairclough Street, passed the deceased close to the board school. A man was at her side, leaning against the wall, and Elizabeth was heard to say, "Not tonight, but some other night." Now, if this evidence was to be relied on, it would appear that the deceased was in the company of that man for upwards of an hour immediately before her death, and that within a quarter of an hour of her being found a corpse, she was refusing her companion something in the immediate neighborhood of where she met her death. But was this the deceased? And even if it were, was it one and the same man who was seen in her company on 3 different occasions? With regard to the identity of the woman, Marshall had the opportunity of watching her for 10 minutes while standing talking in the street at a short distance from him, and she afterwards passed close to him. The constable feels certain that the woman he observed was the deceased, and when he afterwards was called to the scene of the crime, he at once again recognized her and made a statement. While Brown was almost certain that the deceased was the woman to whom his attention was attracted, it might be thought that the frequency of the occurrence of men and women being seen together under similar circumstances might have led to mistaken identity, but the police stated, and several of the witnesses corroborated the statement, that although many couples are to be seen at night in the commercial road, it was exceptional to meet them in Berners Street. With regard to the man seen, there were many points of similarity, but some of the dissimilarity in the descriptions of the 3 witnesses. But these discrepancies did not conclusively prove that there was more than one man in the company of the deceased, for every day's experience showed how facts were differently observed and differently described by honest and intelligent witnesses. Brown, who saw least in consequence of the darkness of the spot at which the 2 were standing, agreed with Smith that his clothes were dark and that his height was about 5 feet 7 inches, but he appeared to him to be wearing an overcoat nearly down to his heels, while the description of Marshall accorded with that of Smith is in every respect but 2. They agreed that he was respectably dressed in a black cut-away coat and dark trousers, and that he was of middle age and without whiskers. On the other hand, they differed with regard to what he was wearing on his head. Smith stated he wore a hard felt deer stalker of dark color. Marshall that he was wearing a round cap with a small peak, like a sailor's. They also differed as to whether he had anything in his hand. Marshall stated he observed nothing. Smith was very precise and stated that he was carrying a parcel done up in a newspaper about 18 inches in length and 6 inches to 8 inches in width. These differences suggest either the woman was, during the evening, in the company of more than one man, a not very improbable supposition, or that the witness uh, had been mistaken in detail. If they were correct in assuming that the man seen in the company of deceased by the three was one and the same person, it followed that he must have spent much time and trouble to induce her to place herself in diabolical clutches. They last saw her alive at the corner of Fairclough Street and Berners Street, saying, "Not tonight, but some other night." Within a quarter of an hour, her lifeless body was found at a spot only a few yards from where she was last seen alive. It was late, and there were few people about, but the place to which the two repaired could not have been selected on account of its being quiet or unfrequented. It had only the merit of darkness. It was the passageway leading into a court in which several families resided. Adjoining the passage and court where there was a club of socialists who, having finished their debate, were singing and making merry. The deceased and her companion must have seen the lights of the club room and the kitchen and off the printing office. They must have heard the music and dancing, for the windows were open. There were persons in the yard but a short time previous to their arrival. 40 minutes past 12, one of the members of the club, named Morris Eagle, passed the spot where the deceased drew her last breath. Passing through the gateway to the back door, which opened into the yard at 1 o'clock, the body was found by the manager of the club. He had been out all day and returned at this time. He was in a two-wheeled barrow drawn by a pony, and as he entered the gateway, his pony shied at some object on his right. There was no lamp in the yard, and having just come out of the street, it was too dark to see what the object was, and he passed on further down the yard. He returned on foot, and on searching, found the body of Elizabeth with her throat cut. If he had not actually disturbed the wretch in this very act, at least he must have been close to his heels, on his heels. Possibly the man was alarmed by the sound of the approaching cart, for the death had only just taken place. He did not inspect the body himself with any care, but blood was flowing from the throat. Even when Spooner reached the spot some few minutes afterwards, and although the bleeding had stopped, Mr. Blackwell's assistant arrived. The whole of her body and the limbs, except her hands, were warm, and even at 10 minutes past 1 a.m. Dr. Blackwell found her face slightly warm and her chest and legs quite warm. In this case, as in other similar cases which had occurred in the neighborhood, no call for assistance was noticed. Although there might have been some noise in the club, it seemed very unlikely that any cry could have been raised without its being heard by someone of those near. The editor of a socialist paper was quietly at work in a shed down the yard, which was used as printing office. There were several families in the cottages in the court, only a few yards distance, and there were 20 persons in the different rooms of the club. But if there was no cry, how did the deceased meet with her death? The appearance of the injury to her throat was not in itself inconsistent with that of a self-inflicted wound. What? That's kind of a messed up way to go. To do that to yourself, though. Yeah, I don't know about that. Both Dr. Phillips and Dr. Blackwell have seen self-inflicted wounds more extensive and severe, but those have not usually involved the carotid or artery. Had some sharp instrument been found near the right hand of the deceased, this case might have had been very much the appearance of a determined suicide. But no such instrument was found, and its absence made suicide an impossibility. The death was, therefore, one by homicide, and it seemed impossible to imagine the circumstances which would fit in the known facts of the case, and which would reduce the crime to manslaughter. There were no signs of any struggle. The clothes were neither torn nor disturbed. It was true that there were marks over both shoulders, produced in the pressures of two hands, but the position of the body suggested either that she was willingly placed or placed herself where she was found. Only the soles of her boots were visible. She was still holding in her left hand a packet of those candies, and there was a bunch of flowers still pinned to her dress front. If she had been forcibly placed on the ground, as Dr. Phillips opines, it was difficult to understand how she failed to attract attention, as it was clear from the appearance of the blood on the ground that the throat was not cut until after she was actually on her back. There were no marks of gagging, no bruises on her face, and no trace of any anesthetic or narcotic in the stomach. While the presence of the candy in her hand showed that she did not make use of it in self-defense, Possibly the pressure marks may have had a less tragical origin. As Dr. Blackwell says, it was difficult to say how recently they were produced. There was one particular which was not easy to explain. When seen by Dr. Blackwell, her right hand was lying on the chest, smeared inside and outside with blood. Dr. Phillips was unable to make any suggestion on how the hand became soiled. There was no injury to the hand, such as they would expect if it had been raised in self-defense while her throat was being cut. Was it done intentionally or by her assassin, or accidentally by those who were early on the spot? The evidence afforded no clue. Unfortunately, the murderer had disappeared without leaving the slightest trace. Even the candies were wrapped up in unmarked paper so that there was nothing to show when they were brought. The cut in the throat might have been effected in such a manner that blood stains on the hands and clothes of the operator were avoided. While the domestic history of the deed suggested the strong probability that her destroyer was strange to her, there was no one among her associates to whom any suspicion has attached. They had not heard that she had a quarrel with anyone, unless they magnified the fact that she had recently left the man with whom she generally cohabitated. But this diversion was of so frequent an occurrence that neither a breach of peace or ensued, nor, so as far as they knew, even hard words. There was therefore in evidence no clue to the murderer and no suggested motive for the murder. The deceased was not in possession of any valuables. She was only known to have a few pence in her pocket at the beginning of the evening. Those who knew her best were unaware of any one likely to injure her. She never accused anyone of having threatened her. She never expressed any fear of anyone. And although she had outbursts of drunkenness, she was generally a quiet woman. The ordinary motives of murder, revenge, jealousy, theft, and passion appeared therefore to be absent from this case, while it was clear from the accounts of all who saw her that night, as well as from the post-mortem examination, that she was not otherwise than sober at the time of her death. In the absence of motive, the age and class of woman selected as victim, and the place and time of the crime, there was a similarity between this case and those mysteries which had recently occurred in that neighborhood. There had been no skillful mutilation, as in the case of Nichols and Chapman, and no unskillful injuries, as in the case of Mitre Square, possibly the work of an imitator. But there had been the same skill exhibited in the way in which the victim had been entrapped and the injuries inflicted, so as to cause instant death and prevent blood from soiling the operator, and the same daring defiance of immediate detection, which, unfortunately, for the peace of the inhabitants and trade of the neighborhood, had hitherto been only too successful. He himself was sorry that the time and attention which the jury had given to the case had not produced a result that would be a perceptible relief to the metropolis, the detection of the criminal, but he was sure that all had used their utmost efforts to accomplish this object, and while he desired to thank the gentlemen of the jury for their kindness and assistance, he was bound to acknowledge the great attention which Inspector Reed and the police had given to the case. He left it to the jury to say how, when, and by what means the deceased came by her death. The jury, after a short deliberation, returned the verdict of willful murder against some person or some persons unknown. Same every single time. Every time. Now, this next chapter, we're on another murder, and this happened September 30th, 1888, and this one is the murder of Catherine Eddowes. But I'm going to stop there because my throat is killing me. But I got a video for us to watch.
And overwhelmed that you feel like you need to talk to someone about it. And by that, I mean going.
So apparently, Jack the Ripper's only clue, the Golston Street graffito, because he wrote on the wall, right? And I guess that was the only clue. I remember that from the movie, anyways. Oh, there I go, Carter.
At 1:45 on the morning of the 30th of September, 1888, Police Constable Edward Watkins found the body of Catherine Eddowes in the southwest corner of Mitre Square on the eastern fringe of the City of London. He raised the alarm, and within moments, police were converging on Mitre Square. As they began a fairly detailed crime
I didn't realize it was going to be on Catherine Eddowes. Do you guys want to wait, or do you just want to watch it? Like, wait until I read about it, or watch? I am craving. I don't know what the hell they're called. I used to eat them a few. Like, they were the most popular thing. They were like clusters of graham, like this, like the cereal, like graham crackers, but they were, I don't know. They were covered in chocolate or white chocolate or dark chocolate. Anyways, they were amazing. I can't remember what the hell the name of them are, but I want them for some reason, like right now. All right, I'll just play.
scene investigation, it became apparent to the detectives at the scene that the killer had cut off and gone away with a large portion of Catherine Eddowes' apron. That piece of apron was discovered at 2:55 in the morning in this street
That's crazy from then to now. Like, this just looks like a normal city, nothing like it was.
here, Goulston Street, round about 5 minutes' walk from Mitre Square. This
I have that
photograph
map.
shows Goulston Street as it would have appeared at the time. And if you look in the background on the right, you can see a large apartment block. That building is Wentworth Model Dwellings, which had been built between 1886 and 1887 on land that had formerly been occupied by some of the district's most sordid slums, which had been swept away at the end of the 1870s. In 1888, this building was largely occupied by Jewish residents. This is Wentworth Model Dwellings as it looks today. At 2:55 a.m. on the morning of Sunday, the 30th of September, 1888, just over an hour after Watkins had found the body of Catherine Eddowes in Mitre Square, Police Constable Alfred Long was walking his beat along Goulston Street and was passing Wentworth Model Dwellings when, in the doorway that led to the staircase of numbers 108 to 119, he found the missing piece of apron. It was stained with blood and feces, and the blade of a bloody knife had evidently been wiped on it. Long didn't know it at the time, but he had found the only physical clue that Jack the Ripper ever left behind.
Wow.
It's a clue for several reasons. Firstly,
So it was an apron and it had blood and feces on it. Wow. Well, a piece of it.
it's a geographical clue because it tells us which direction the killer headed in after having committed the murder of Catherine Eddowes in Mitre Square. He would undoubtedly have been aware that the area would soon be awash with police officers hunting for the perpetrator of the crime. So therefore, it was imperative that he went to ground as quickly as possible and headed home. And the fact he came from Mitre Square to Goulston Street means that he headed east. In other words, it suggests that whoever it was, he was somebody who lived in the area. Secondly,
Look
it
at all
answers
those
the question of
people.
how much blood the killer had on himself after the crimes. There is a commonly held
Like from the before and the after. So the poor drawing or photo or whatever is packed with people. And then you see today it's all graffitied and there's nobody there.
belief that the killer would have been covered in blood as he fled at the scenes of his crimes. But this is not necessarily the case. The evidence suggests that he asphyxiated his victims first, so the hearts would have stopped beating and there would not have been the arterial spurt that would have covered him in blood when he came to carry out the horrific mutilations. Certainly his hands would have been bloodstained, which is why he took the portion of apron, as he would have been anxious to wipe away the incriminating blood as soon as possible. Had he stopped in the
believe
open
it, leave
streets to
it.
do so, he might have been noticed and attracted suspicion. He needed privacy, and as it happened, this was a recessed doorway in which the lights on the stairs were extinguished at 11 o'clock at night. It therefore offered perfect cover for him to wipe his hands, wipe his knife, and then, clear of incriminating bloodstains, he stepped out onto the street and headed back to his lair, wherever it may have been in the district. Constable Long's first thought on finding the apron was that somebody had been attacked and might be lying injured or even dead on the stairwell within, so he stood up intending to search inside the doorway. As he did so, he saw a message scrawled in chalk on the wall which read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The word Jews was
Another-
spelled Juwes or Jewes or Juews. Different police officers would later remember different spellings of the graffito. The meaning, though, was quite obvious. It was anti-Semitic graffito above a genuine clue that had been left behind by the murderer. Moments later, another officer arrived at the scene, and Long asked
Isn't
him
that?
to
I'm pretty
guard
sure
the
that's when the outrage came out that because he said Jew, then they all believed it was a Jew.
building, telling him to keep a careful watch on anybody entering or leaving it. Long then took the apron round to Commercial Street Police Station and handed it over to an inspector. Soon, officers of the Metropolitan Police's H Division were gathering around the doorway and were gazing at the graffito with feelings of great trepidation. Mindful of the strong feelings of anti-Semitism that had surfaced in the area in the wake of the leather apron scare, and realizing that Wentworth Model Dwellings not only stood in a largely Jewish locality, but was also inhabited almost exclusively by Jews, the Metropolitan Police began to fear that if the message was left, it could lead to a resurgence of the unrest that had swept the district in early September, and the consequences could be dire.
It's time to get back on track with WeCook's ready-to-eat meals delivered right to your door, saving time.
Yeah,
They
right.
were
How's
therefore
the
anxious
portion?
to erase the message and to do so sooner rather than later. But both the apron and the graffito pertain to an investigation that was being carried out by a separate police force, the City of London Police, in whose jurisdiction Catherine Eddowes had been murdered. The city detectives had soon crossed the boundary into Metropolitan Police territory and were also gathering around the doorway. They were not so keen to erase what they saw as an important clue in their investigation, and the two forces clashed over what should be done about the chalked message. The city police were adamant that it should be photographed. The Metropolitan Police pointed out that that would mean waiting until it was light, by which time Gentile buyers would be arriving in their thousands to purchase from the Jewish stallholders at the Petticoat Lane, Wentworth Street and Goulston Street Sunday markets. Since there was no way of keeping the message hidden from these crowds, the Metropolitan Police believed that the result might well be a full-scale riot against the Jews.
Yeah, that's right.
Inspector Daniel House of the City of London Police suggested a compromise whereby only the top line, "the Jews are," would be erased. But as Superintendent Arnold of the Metropolitan Police later pointed out in a report, had only a portion of the writing been removed, the context would have remained. The bickering was still going on when Sir Charles Warren arrived at the scene between 5 and 5:30 a.m. Since the doorway stood on Metropolitan Police territory, and he was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, his word was final, and he immediately concurred with his officers that leaving the graffito any longer would lead to far greater crimes against innocent Jews. So he ordered that the message be erased without delay and before any photograph of it could be taken. It would
What?
prove one of the most controversial orders he gave in the entire investigation, and he was subjected to intense press
Why the hell would
criticism
they
in
take
the
a
days that
photo?
followed.
Doesn't even make sense. There's a piece of evidence there, apparently written by Jack the Ripper, and instead of taking a picture, they didn't. Because they were, well, they feared riots and stuff against Jews. I get that, but you should have took a picture and then erased it.
And indeed, his actions in having the graffito erased before it could be photographed have been the subject of numerous conspiracy theories in connection to the Jack the Ripper mystery ever since. On the 6th of November, in a report to the Home Office, Warren defended his action. It was just getting light. The public would be in the streets in a few minutes in a neighbourhood very much crowded by Jewish vendors and Christian purchasers from all over London. I do not hesitate to say that if the writing had been left, there would have been an onslaught upon the Jews. Property would have been wrecked and lives would probably have been lost. In fairness to Sir Charles Warren, many of those who saw the graffito commented that it looked faded, as though it had been there for some time. Also, it seems somewhat unlikely that, having taken the trouble to clean his hands to obliterate incriminating bloodstains, the Ripper would have then risked lingering in the doorway long enough to chalk the message on the wall, knowing that at any moment a passing police officer might spot him. The probability is that the message was already there, possibly left over from the anti-Semitic unrest that had swept the area in the wake of the leather apron scare, and that it was a complete coincidence that the Ripper had chosen that same doorway in which to clean himself up and leave behind his only clue. Given the events of a few weeks previous, Warren was probably justified in his belief that erasing the message would spare innocent Jews from becoming the targets of avenging Gentile mobs, and he probably made the right judgment call based on the information immediately available to him. With hindsight, however, it is interesting to note that because of the controversy over Warren's actions, the Goulston Street graffito was widely reported, and yet the wide-scale anti-Semitism that Warren so feared did not break out again.
Oh, that's good.
Today, the Happy Days Fish and Chip Shop occupies the doorway in which the graffito was found, and in their restaurant you will find a display of various exhibits and images connected with the Jack the Ripper case, including a reproduction of the writing that was found on their wall.
Wow.
People come here to enjoy their mouth-watering portions of fish and chips, and few of them give any thought to the fact that they are dining at the very location at which Jack the Ripper left behind his only clue.
I don't remember him leaving behind any clue. But I do remember I do remember the writing though. I don't remember anything about the apron. That's pretty interesting. But he also seems like pretty smart. I mean, why would he leave that apron behind, that piece of apron behind, that he wiped the blood off and the feces off of? I don't know. I don't get it. That's weird to me. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll be back again Thursday. This book is so huge. I have to read it twice a week, or I feel like I'm just going to get lost. I gotta put some pictures up too. Right? That's what I was thinking. I'd love to eat there too. I would just want to go there. No, I like this guy. I really do. I like his channel, and the reason why I keep playing like short clips and stuff from there is because it's like that because he goes to the actual scenes, and it's the only channel I found to be legit. I like them a lot. Um, somebody had said something about Jack the Ripper tours, and I was looking on the internet for them. They said to look that up or whatever for more information and whatnot. And it was weird. I found this channel, so I was like, I started watching it. Oh, it's okay. Don't feel bad. No, I did not know about that piece of apron. I had no idea. It just seems to me that he's not gonna purposely leave that behind. I don't know. It had to been like some mishap. It accidentally happened. I can't see him personally doing that. Not at all. But I do remember that writing on the wall, and I remember it being erased quite quickly before anyone else could see it because there would have been a war on Jews because that statement basically said it was a Jew that was doing these murders. Yeah. So on Thursday, I'll read more and then we'll play another clip. And the next one what should I do? I guess it'll have to be will be one on Catherine Eddowes, the next girl we're gonna read about. I think I've posted up to date all the photos. I'm quite positive. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I did from Jack the Ripper. And I'm pretty sure I just did all of them too from the other book. I hope I did. Only back then they were only using a shed as a mortuary for the Whitechapel district. The utterly inadequate and inappropriate premises next to a playground were criticized by the coroner, Win Baxter. Can you imagine having a mortuary right there? Right next to the playground. What the hell? Hey kids, don't mind the dead bodies coming in. That's gonna give you nightmares for the rest of your life. That's insane. All right, I hope you guys have a good night. I gotta make a video. It's almost every day I have to make a video because that KJ just up to bullshit every day. Don't feel bad. I wouldn't. You feel guilty because you don't love the women that died. I feel opposite. Regardless of their work, for me it matters, and for not saying it doesn't matter to you, but for me, um, well, one, I'm Canadian and I'm a Pisces, so I'm just like in love with love, and I'm just like that. So any victim of any crime, I'm just doesn't matter what their position in life was. I give a shit about. That's just me though. I still gotta read that script. I gotta make a video. I gotta get that Patreon going. Shit, what else? My store. Hey, give me some. Can you guys give me some ideas? Um, for what you want. For apparel wise. I do have that store and I do have some stuff on it, but I can't think of anything right now. My mind's blank. I don't love that the woman died. Oh, of course not. I misread that. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, we're the same in that sense. I love stuff like this, but yeah, we don't love that there's victims. Absolutely. Both agree on that one for sure. Just interesting to me. I don't know why. I don't know. All right, you guys have a good night. I got a lot. Plus, I gotta finish painting that furniture. It's taking me forever. Like, it's so little. Like, here's one piece. I painted this one. It's a little armoire for the bedroom. This goes in the baby's room, this stupid thing. Alright, you guys have a good night. I don't know, I just have a lot of work to do. I'll be back tomorrow with, the Paul and Carla story. I should be almost finished it because I'm cutting out a lot of things because I can't handle it. Alright, you guys have a good night. I'll be back tomorrow at 7. Bye.